Hello and welcome back to Redirecting. I'm going to be talking about the subject of Africa again. One thing I wanted to make mention of that I thought was very interesting, I was doing some research on a particular topic, and when I was looking up the cradle of civilization, I found it interesting that the few sources that I did read did not list Africa as the cradle of civilization, only Egypt. And then they had other regions of the world like China and, places like that as being the cradle of civilization where everything started. Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into that. I do believe that areas in the East, all of that was dominated by melanated people at some point. I will say that much, but I find it funny how when they report certain things, that they downplay Africa. It's like you can't even do that. You can't downplay Africa because it is very clear and obvious that that is where life in general originated. Okay, I had to make sure that no one was getting hurt. Two of the ducks were mating. Okay. And I just wanted to make sure no one was getting hurt. All that noise. I wish they would go in the water somewhere and let me do my video. But anyway, what I'm going to be talking about in this video is not really the cradle of civilization, but the fact that I believe African puppets are far more dangerous than the people that they actually work for. And let me explain to you why. And not just African puppets, but any melanated person who is easily controlled and manipulated by these foreign powers, or if you live in these foreign lands, but you're easily controlled and manipulated by these Gentiles, you are, to me, more dangerous than they are themselves. Because there's a sellout mentality that is there to where your own people in your mind can be turned on. They become obsolete to you. They become disposable, expendable. And those, to me, are very good reasons why we should be careful. We have to be careful when considering people who have such a mindset. Now, back to the continent of Africa, when I think of these puppets, we have seen enough and we know enough to say that they can't be trusted. Now, what I find to be very sad is that people feel like you actually have to visit the continent in order to get a fair assessment of the continent. Now, you have people who see all of these things that are happening here in the U.S., all of these things that are happening in Canada, in the UK, in South America. It's like any other part of the world. You don't have to visit there to see that there's something going on. We don't have to visit China to know that there are some things and issues in China or India. Okay? But when it comes to Africa, people are saying unless you go there and experience it, you can't speak on it. What kind of nonsense is that? We know that all around the world you have the good and the bad. In every region you have the good and the bad, okay? I don't have to visit China to know that there is good and bad that exists there. I don't have to visit India to know that there's good and bad. I don't have to visit South America to know that there's good and bad. We are fully aware of what's going on in Haiti. We are fully aware of what's going on in the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Brazil, many regions around the world. But there is a deception that's happening right now because of this 400-year year of return, where people feel like you cannot speak on Africa unless you've been there. It kind of reminds me of how these European powers right now, they feel like you cannot speak on their deeds anywhere in the world. And they title you with something if you speak against their deeds. All of a sudden you're called a person who causes division, or you're called a person who is trying to divide the races. You're given a label because you choose to speak on their issues. Now, I've said many times that I have a special love for the people of Africa. I know that that's where my people are. I know that the children of Ham and the children of Shem reside there. I know this. A lot of our people are trying to say that all of Africa is Ham. I know better than that. The majority of the tribes are still left in Africa. I realize that, and I know that. I also realize that Africa has two sides. You have the beautiful side, and then you have the areas that are poverty stricken and where the people are struggling daily to live and to survive. I understand that. But I'm talking about puppets, and I'm talking about how things are being ran on the continent. Whenever we talk about things that happen on the continent or how things are being ran on the continent, you get all of this defensiveness. You get people saying, how can you know unless you visited there? It amazes me that you have people who, that's their way of trying to shut you up. And then they want to school you and say that Africa is not just one country. It's like, we know that. When I was specifically talking about Ghana, I made it very clear that I was talking about something that was happening in Ghana. And people want to deflect and say, well, Ghana is only one country. And I'm like, okay, Sherlock, thanks for informing me of that. We already knew that, which is why we were talking about specifically something that was happening in Ghana. I know that Tanzania has a different market than Ghana. Likewise, I know that Sudan is totally different than South Africa. All of these regions have different economies, different leaders, different things that plague them, different populations that speak different languages. All of this is understood. But to try to deflect from a specific topic that's happening in Africa shows that there is some very clear deception going on with many people. Just like here in America, our people here do the same thing. We're not unified here in America. We have those who cannot unify and will not unify because they want to merge with the powers that be. They want to merge with the oppressors, you see. But back to what I was saying about Africa and the puppets being, to me, more dangerous than the actual people they work for, is the fact that they will sell out their whole population. See, I care about the people, the population that's being mistreated. But when you have people who will try to sweep things under the rug just to save face for the whole continent, it's too late for all of that. It is well seen and even talked about by people who live on the continent or people who have left the continent. It's well talked about, it's well known, it's well seen. We know what happened on the continent. We know the history of the continent. We know the history of the world. Anyone who studies knows, anyone who studies history specifically, knows that the whole world has been taken over. And we know who did the takeover. We know how they divided up the continent, how they divided up the people, and they conquered the people. And we also know how they right now are putting in power those who they want in power. And we know what they do when you try to go against what they want done. And so my thing is this about the puppets, is the puppets, they will be promised so many different things for them and their family. They're like, okay, they will sit down with these European powers and they will promise them, they'll look, we'll make sure that you and your family are okay. But this is how we need you to run things over here. This is what we need you to do over here. And so those puppets, they will look at the continent, they'll look at the people, and they won't go against the system. because they're like, well, look, I'm going to look out for me, myself, and I, and my family, and the rest of the people. I don't care what happens to them. That is how many of these puppets think. That's why I believe they are more dangerous. Of course, we know that a unified Africa is the best way to do things, but because of the divisions that have already been put in place, and the fear and the debt and all of this stuff, having a unified Africa is going to take divine intervention. You have people who believe that the African Union is trying to unify Africa. But how can that be so when the African Union wasn't even established by African people? A lot of people don't realize that this was put together by others. And they want to sit back and think that the whole goal of the African Union is to unify Africa. To me, the first order of business on anybody who is truly trying to unify Africa would be to take care of the people. How can we protect our people? How can we help our people? How can we feed our people? If we only understood as a people that taking care of the people is of a greater benefit than it is to allow them to go through the things that they go through, we would have a whole lot more. We would be further along than we are. I'm going to do another video on a particular subject based on a comment left by one of our viewers. This is a viewer that I actually had a chance to meet at our Kodesh events, and she has worked in various regions around the world, being a part of the military, going to Africa in various areas as well. And I believe that her 2 cents is very valuable in what I'm going to talk about in this next video. Or it may not be my next video, but in a video. But what I find interesting is how, again, we are being asked to ignore the puppets. I mean, that's one thing that the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to the AU, tried to push. He tried to say that we should ignore the puppets that are getting $2 billion and pay more attention to the foreign nationals that are getting hundreds of billions. To me, the one that's getting the $2 billion, the African leader who is the puppet, is more dangerous, because he has proven that he doesn't care about his population, that he is willing to be bought and paid for to cooperate with these foreign nations. His cooperation shows that he is not for the population. When we talk about the resources of Africa, you also have to talk about who controls the resources, because what is the point in talking about the resources of Africa without talking about who actually controls the resources? Because all of that plays a role. It makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference, as a matter of fact. Why talk about the resources of Africa if you're not going to talk about who controls them? That is the part that I feel like we are being deceived on, because people are using the wealth of Africa to try to draw others there, other black people there. But they don't understand, or should I say those blacks that are being lured back there, they don't understand that the people of the continent don't control these things. And even we will not be able to go over there and just try to take over these things. I've actually seen comments where people believe that we can just buy our way into these markets and force these foreign nations out. It's going to take a whole lot more than just a few million or even $1 billion to buy our way into what has already been established, the stronghold that is already there. And also, too, I want to do a video where I'm going to talk about how in all of this push for people to come back to Africa and all of this unity, I don't see the Most High in any of this. I don't see any of these people talking about the Most High and where he fits into all of this. They're talking about the strength of humans coming together without him. The strategy doesn't involve the Most High at all. And this is why every attempt to do any type of unification of the people on the continent and those in the diaspora hasn't reached any major heights. We just see pockets of people going there, and even they have stories to tell about their position on the continent. They're just citizens, but they are not running anything other than their own business, those who have businesses. I also want to talk about, too, how there have been those who have gone to the continent to visit or to live, and they tell you, you better make sure you have money. Don't go over there expecting to get a job, because you will not find one. If you don't go over there all ready to take care of your own family remotely, either through an internet business or established funds that you already have, money that you've already saved up, and I'm talking about a lot of it. If you don't go over there fully prepared, you might experience some difficulties. I've heard a lot of people who have actually went there to live and visit speak on this. They have spoken on this. And for those of you who think that we're trying to discourage people from moving to the continent, you totally miss the point. We're just trying to say, and I've said this many times, that don't give people a half story because of your own agenda. Equip people with all of the truth so that they can know and understand what they are getting into. Because some people can't afford to make a mistake and make a move such as that. They can't afford it. The last thing you want to do is get into a position to where you are going to go somewhere and you're going to struggle financially and don't even have the means to return back to where you came from. Where at least you may have family that could help you. Because the people on the continent in various regions, they themselves are struggling. They don't have a lot of the social programs that you've become used to. Not that we should get ourselves used to social programs, but what I'm saying is if you go to an area that you're not familiar with, you should first make sure that you're able to be self-sufficient, growing your own food, generating your own income, and all of that. Because you're in unfamiliar territory now. And a lot of the people that live on the continent, like I said before, the majority of the citizens on the continent are in need of help themselves. They live in poverty. There are a lot of wealthy people in Africa, yes, but let's keep it real. A lot of our people, and even the children of Ham, have a struggle that some of us couldn't even imagine going through. So don't just try to paint the one side of Africa. Africa is beautiful. Africa is very rich and wealthy in resources. But who controls those resources? Keep it real. Be fair. Don't be deceptive. Having people think that they can just move there and all is going to fall into place. You need to be equipped with all of the information and all of the knowledge of what to expect when you get there. Because these puppets that are in power on the continent of Africa, trust me, if they don't care about their own population, they do not care about you in the diaspora. And they will not stick their necks out to try to do anything for you in the diaspora. Keep that in mind for those of you who get so upset when anyone even mentions anything about Africa. I don't have to visit Africa or China or the UK or South America to know that there are issues. I don't have to go to Haiti to know that there are issues. And that is very deflective. You're being deflective. You're deflecting, should I say, when you're telling people that they can't speak on it because I've never visited there. It's very clear to the people around the world that something is going on here in the U.S. It would sound foolish of me to say, if you've never visited the U.S., you can't speak on it. Very foolish of me to say that. It would be very foolish. No one has to live here or visit here to know that there's some whacked out things happening here in the U.S. Likewise, when we see things happening, very clear things, of course, we know that there's a lot of deception out here. There's a lot of deception being talked about out here, but everything is not deception. Some things are just clear and obvious. When I spoke on the issue of the banks that closed in Ghana, they were talking about bad investments that were made by these banks, and people lost their money as a result of it. That happens everywhere around the world. And to say that we can't speak on these things, you're deflecting. There are things happening here in the U.S. There are things happening in Canada. There are things happening in Ghana. And I still stand behind my statement when I say that you better be careful playing around in these markets, because these markets can be manipulated. I mean, we had here in the U.S. savings and loan scams. There were all kinds of things that happened. There are brokers, in my opinion, that are not always fair in their dealings when they're dealing with other people's money. They're not always honest. And so things that happen here in the U.S. happen in other regions of the world too. Just because they happen in Africa doesn't mean that we can't speak on them. In any market, I will say it again, you have to be very, very careful, because these people are not always honest. When you're dealing around in these markets, they manipulate markets all the time. Some of these people know ahead of time when there's going to be a crash in the market. Don't think that they don't know it. It's the population of people who are investing who don't know. But those higher ups, you can best believe that a lot of their money is well protected. They know when to get out. They know when to move, but they're not going to tell you that. So yes, these markets can be manipulated. And I will continue to say, be very careful. Many of these institutions that set up on the continent, many of them are ran by foreigners. I'm not saying that all of them are, but you have to understand, when you are dealing with these financial markets, things can be manipulated, and people lose their money all the time, all over the world. And so I just get this strange reaction from people whenever we talk about anything dealing with Africa. We can even talk about how the sand in the Sahara Desert is really, really hot. You say that and somebody's going to say, how do you know? You've never been there. How can you speak on the Sahara when you've never been there? I don't need to go to the desert to know that it's hot. So get real. I'm speaking to my people here in the U.S. who get excited about going to Africa and don't understand that you have to have the financial means to do so. That's what I'm talking about. You have to have the financial means. You can't just up and go, because you can't go there expecting to be taken care of if these African leaders aren't even taking care of their own people. What makes you think they're going to take care of you? Don't be fooled by crafty words. I don't care who they're coming from. Don't be fooled by it. If they can't take care of their own people, how the heck do you think they're going to take care of you? So if you can't afford to go to Africa, you better rethink, okay? If you can afford it and you're confident in going there, more power to you. I don't have an issue with anybody wanting to go to Africa, because I'm just going to be honest with you. If I had the financial means, I don't mean just the money to go, but the money to live indefinitely. That's a whole other set of circumstances. If you have the money to just go and set your life up the way you want, I would prefer to be there. That is just me personally. And when I say set yourself up the right way, I'm talking about the whole 9 yards. Being able to establish business there, being able to be self-sufficient, growing and raising our own livestock, growing our own food, having a source of water, being able to do all the things that we need. That's what I'm talking about. I don't mean going over there, buying a house and all of this kind of stuff, but don't have any means to live beyond that, because there's more to moving to Africa than just having an address or a residence. Being able to support yourself and your family after the fact is also very important, and also needs to be considered. And so I think I'm done with this video. I want to visit another topic on Africa shortly. Again, based on a comment that one sister made, who's actually traveled the world, not just Africa, but from her own experiences. I think we in the diaspora should listen to what she has to say. If you listen to those who only speak of the good, also listen to the other side of it. Listen to the other side. There's always 2 sides to every story, and everybody's experience is different. And some will have the means to go to Africa and do just fine. But if you're one of those people who are just trying to escape something, and you don't really have the financial means, then you better sit back and think a little while before you just jump out of the frying pan into the fire. With that, family, I will say shalom.